So if you watch The Odyssey, you'll probably relate to one of these videos. Okay, so now you know that you are not alone. So what the hell happened? To understand why The Odyssey sounds the way it does, we need to start with one thing. And no, sadly for a lot of you, it has nothing to do with Nolan. It starts with how cinema sound actually works. Every cinema in the world has a volume control, and that volume control has a standard position. It's called fader 7. When a cinema is set to fader 7, the sound plays at exactly the level the director and the mixing engineers intended. Not louder, not quieter, exactly right. This standard exists since the 1970s, when Dolby introduced it. The idea was simple. If every cinema in the world uses the same reference point, every audience in the world hears the film the same way. The director mixes the film at fader 7. The cinema plays it at fader 7. Everyone's happy. There's just one problem. Nobody uses fader 7 anymore. Most cinemas today operate between fader 4 and fader 5.5. Why? Because over the years, films started getting louder and louder. Audiences complained. Cinemas turned the volume down. And then filmmakers mixed even louder to compensate. And cinemas turned it down even more. It's a loudness war. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this in music. The louder something sounds, the better your brain thinks it is. It's literally a psychological trick. And cinema fell for it too. So by the time The Odyssey arrives, a film mixed to be heard at fader 7 in the best cinemas in the world, some theaters are playing it at 4. And there's a very specific reason for that in multiplexes. These massive cinema complexes have dozens of screens sharing the same walls. If one screen is too loud, you start hearing explosions in the rom-com next door. So they turn everything down, not for you, but to avoid sound bleeding between rooms. So, okay, then it should sound quieter, not louder. What's happening? Well, here's the thing. That fader number means nothing if the theater isn't calibrated, and most theaters aren't. Think of it like two TVs, same volume at 50. One sounds louder than the other, because they were never calibrated to the same reference. Fader 7 in your theater could be 85 decibels, or it could be 95 decibels. Nobody knows, because nobody checked. So Nolan mixes for fader 7 at 85 decibels in a perfectly calibrated room. Your theater, if you're lucky, has fader 7, but at something completely different. IMAX is not just a bigger screen. Sound system is completely different. A normal cinema subwoofer goes down to 40 Hz. IMAX goes down to 23 Hz. What does that mean? Simple. In a normal cinema, you hear the bass. In IMAX, you feel it. In your chest, in your seat. But here's what most people don't know. IMAX theaters are designed to be completely silent.
To work in a film, the room itself has to be quiet. Because if a filmmaker is trying to get an insect to walk across a dry leaf, if the room noise is louder than that dry leaf, you won't even hear it. So we get our theaters quiet by controlling the air conditioning sound, the HVAC system, and we have the acoustic treatment in the room so that sounds are absorbed and the room itself is quiet.
Everything is engineered to eliminate background noise, because the quieter the room, the wider the dynamic range you can deliver.
Well, dynamic range is the level of which we're able to, the difference, I guess, between the loudest sound and the quietest sound that can be delivered. At IMAX, we try to deliver the widest dynamic range possible.
So you're sitting in a room with absolute silence, and then it hits you. And the Odyssey score has no orchestra, just percussion.
No orchestra, no familiar sounds that you've heard before in a movie like this.
All concentrated in those low frequencies, all of it hitting that subwoofer at once, in a room designed to amplify the contrast between silence and sound. That's why your chest hurt. On top of that, the Odyssey has an extreme dynamic range. The difference between the quietest moment and the loudest is massive. 1 second you can barely hear anything. The next, it hits you like a wall. Your brain never gets a chance to adjust, making it uncomfortable. And then there's Nolan himself. Because here's the thing. The loud parts are not the only problem. Half the complaints are about not being able to hear the dialogue. And that's not an accident either. Nolan has said it himself. He uses dialogue as a sound effect.
Give him a humor setting so he'd fit in better with his unit. Thinks it relaxes us. A giant, sarcastic robot.
When a character speaks in a noisy environment, on a ship, in a storm, in the middle of a battle, Nolan deliberately buries that dialogue under the sound effects and the score, because that's what it would actually sound like if you were there. The problem is, you're not there. And when you can't tell if you're supposed to hear a line or not, you spend the whole scene thinking about that instead of feeling the film. So you have a room designed for silence, a score built entirely on low frequencies, a calibration system that most theaters ignore, and a director who deliberately buries dialogue under everything else. None of them are wrong on their own, but together, that's why The Odyssey felt like an assault. The problem is the gap between what the film was designed for and what most people actually got. Some people enjoyed and had no problem at all, and some even left the cinema. So I'm gonna let you guys take the decision.